Pathological Condition Glomerular Disease by Dana Richman. The pathological condition glomerular disease is when there are physical changes in the glomeruli of the kidney which causes damage. This can be caused by genetic as well as environmental reasons and can be put into two categories, which are glomerulonephritis and glomerulosclerosis. What is glomerular disease? Well, it's a disease caused by damage to the filtering part of the kidney called the glomeruli. This allows protein and red blood cells to not be filtered and pass into the urine. It can also prevent the kidneys from filtering toxins from the blood and allowing toxic levels to increase. It can be caused by autoimmune disease, hereditary nephritis, and infection. What happens is it causes eventually end-stage renal failure, and if it is a type that cannot be recovered and not be prevented, then it can only be treated with hemodialysis or peritoneal dialysis or renal transplant. Without these three treatments, it would end in death. These treatments start during the 5 stages, which is determined as follows, stages 1 through 5. And as you can see on the chart to the side, this is the most common categories in which they fall into. The circulatory system is also affected by glomerular disease, which is due to the damage of the glomerulus, which allows, again, the toxins to increase to unsafe levels. The signs and symptoms are hypertension, edema, proteinuria, hematuria, and anemia. Edema can be observed typically in the lower extremities, starting in the ankles, which is due to gravity. The best way to test for this is by pressing the tip of your finger into the lower leg and counting 1 plus, 2 plus, 3 plus, and depending on how long it takes for the skin to bounce back up will determine at what stage, what level the edema is. One of the ways to help with this is a low salt diet and prescribed diuretics. Hypertension is another symptom that occurs when the kidney is no longer able to produce the hormone to regulate blood pressure to maintain a healthy range. The patient can feel dizziness, headaches, tinnitus, which is a ringing in the ears. You can also see blown blood vessels in the eyes, and this can usually be controlled with diet, exercise, and medications. Proteinuria is another sign and symptom, which is when there's too much protein being passed into the urine because it was not filtered out, and the urinalysis will detect this, and during higher levels the patient can also see this by seeing a lot of foam and bubbles in the toilet after urination. The other symptom that is commonly seen is hematuria in the blood, which is red blood cells passing into the urine. And this can be seen sometimes if it's a gross amount, you'll see bright red in the urine, or typically what's seen is what looks like Coca-Cola, that type of color. Anemia is a very common symptom that comes as the kidney disease progresses on into the final stages of renal failure, and that is because the kidney is no longer producing the hormone erythropoietin, and which is needed for the bone marrow to be told to produce more red blood cells. And because there's a low amount, the blood has to circulate more often throughout the system to perfuse the body to the proper levels that are needed. And signs and symptoms that the patient typically feels is tiredness, headache, dizziness, shortness of breath, chest pain. Patient will become very pale, very weak. And you will also see typically left ventricular hypertrophy, which is where the left ventricle enlarges due to the overworked heart muscle. So the short-term consequences of glomerular disease are the symptoms and the damage that is caused to the body which is causing difficulties in the patient's work and personal life. The long-term consequences is permanent damage to the kidney that is irreversible and results in dialysis and renal transplant. And if those two are not done, then results in death. Symptoms can also cause permanent damage to the patient, such as a myocardial infarction that can result in permanent heart damage and decreased function. Also, it can cause a stroke that can result in death or permanent brain function decreasing, which can affect the motor and speech skills. In close, this disease can have long-term permanent adverse effects for the patient, as well as fatal if not closely monitored and treated. Thank you, and if you have any questions, I also have the references here for further reading.